Hey, good morning, everyone. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Really glad that you survived Snowmageddon this morning and were able to join us. Really do appreciate that. Quick story. Years ago, I won't say how long because it just makes me feel older than, well, as old as I am, but years ago, I was in Vancouver to watch the Vancouver Canucks take on the Los Angeles Kings. There was a lot of excitement around the game because, as seems to be the story with the Canucks, they were fighting for that final and last playoff spot, and they were fighting against LA. It was a win, and you're in. Lose, you're out. And so a lot of excitement in the city about the game, and I was excited too. But I wasn't just excited for the game. I was excited because I was going to be able to watch the game from one of those executive suites. Yeah, at the time I was a commercial fisherman, and every year what we did is all the fishermen that I knew and the fish plants, the buyers that we sold to, we would all kind of chip in together and rent a suite so we could kind of hang out, see each other, and watch a hockey game. What a great idea. And these suites, man, I don't know if you've ever been to one. They're fantastic. They got tons of room. You can walk around and you can talk with people without disturbing anyone. You can watch the game if that's what you choose to do. There was a beverage and food bar. There was a private washroom, so you didn't have to mingle with the commoners down below between periods. It was fantastic. And it's like a VIP experience, and it began before the game even started. It actually began as you entered into the arena, because you didn't go in to the arena through the public gate. No. You would enter into this entrance that was at the back of the arena. There was two attendants outside, and they would greet you, check your ticket. Once they verified that you were who you said you were and you had a ticket to get into the game, they'd usher you into this well-appointed lobby. I mean, it had all these signed pictures of, past Canucks who were, the greats of the game and all that type of stuff. And it was just beautiful. But really, it was just a glorified lobby, because the reason you were in there was to wait for the elevator, the private elevator, that would whisk you to the executive suite level. And so my buddies and I, we're standing in there and we're chatting away, and there's tons of conversation going on, lots of laughter, when all of a sudden this guy comes in the door. And right away, the whole mood in the lobby changed. It went from this raucous laughter and conversation to these hushed tones of whispering and looking around nervously. And I'm trying to figure out what just happened. And so I'm looking around the room, and I see what it is. Kurt Russell, the actor from Escape from New York, Backdraft, more recently, he played Santa Claus in the Christmas Chronicles. He had just walked in. And so everyone's whispering. They're kind of like, hey, did you see who's here? And is that who I think it is? Is that Kurt Russell? And everyone's all freaked out and all hushy. And so we're standing there, and it's like, yeah, I think that's Kurt Russell. And next thing you know, we hear this ding and the elevator doors open. So my buddies and I, we all pile in, along with Kurt Russell. He's on the elevator with us. And so we're heading up, and of course, you can imagine, everyone's trying to act cool, like, I know that's Kurt Russell, but I don't let stuff like that impress me, and it's just getting really awkward. Well, then it got really awkward. One of the guys that was with us is staring at Kurt Russell. He's just staring at him. And we're like, dude, don't stare. It's weird. And finally he says, I know who you are. And we're like, oh, great. And Kurt Russell was kind of cool. He goes, well, who do you think I am? And that's when the guy that was with us said, you're Patrick Swayze. Oh, awkward. I felt embarrassed for the guy. Do they even look the same, really, if you see them side by side? Apparently some people think they do, but thankfully the elevator doors opened, and putting an end to all the uncomfortableness that had kind of developed. But Patrick Swayze, really? Who do you think I am? Jesus asked a similar question about 2,000 years ago, when he asked his closest followers, who do people say that I am? And the answers from the crowd back then were just as varied as they are today. For some, Jesus, they thought Jesus was a prophet. Some thought he was a great teacher. Some thought he was a miracle worker. But there were others that thought he was a lunatic, delusional, he was a liar, or even worse. One time during this big Jewish festival in Jerusalem, there was a lot of chatter in the crowd about who exactly Jesus was. And we get let in on some of what was happening in the Bible in the New Testament. Listen to this. John is the guy that's writing this. It says, there was a lot of grumbling about him, Jesus, among the crowds. Some argued, he's a good man. He really is. He's a good man. But others said, he's nothing but a fraud who deceives people. Others saw him as delusional, saying, and they're speaking right to Jesus, you, a mere man, claim to be God. Then, as is the case today, when it comes to Jesus, the crowd was divided about him. But that question still remains. Who is Jesus? Was he just a man? Was he a fraud? Was he a good teacher? Was he morally good? Was he a prophet? Or was he God in the flesh as he claimed to be? Or was he something worse? After Jesus asked, who do people say that I am? He asked an even more significant question. He asked his closest followers, all his disciples that were there with him, walking with him. He looked at them. After asking that question, he said, who do you say that I am? And it's a significant question in that it's personal. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what someone else thinks about Jesus, who they think he is. What matters is what you think, or who you think he is. That's what matters. And so let me ask you, who do you say Jesus is? Maybe you share opinions similar to those of the people of the day when Jesus was around. Maybe you think that Jesus, he existed, he was real, he was a real person. He just had some great, good moral teaching. Or maybe you're a little more skeptical of that and you're thinking, I'm not really sure, all these miracles he pulled off. Were they really miracles, or was he like the Houdini of the day and they were just really illusions and tricks that weren't really true? Maybe you're watching this morning and you're not sure what to think about Jesus. You hear that question, you go, I don't know what to think, if he was real or who he was, what he was like. And that's why you're watching. That's why you're tuning in this morning. You've read about him, you've heard theories about him, you've heard stories about him, but you're just not sure what to make of this man named Jesus who walked this planet for 33 years and left an indelible mark that reverberates to this day throughout history. Well, if any of that describes you, if you haven't fully made up your mind yet, if you're still kind of oscillate between, I'm pretty sure this is who Jesus is, to, I'm not so sure anymore, and you go back and forth, if that describes you, hear this, you are in really good company. Jesus' closest followers, his friends, those that spent time with him every day for years, those that walked with him, talked with him, cried with him, laughed with him, sweated with him, they had a hard time deciding who he really was. Yeah, they believed Jesus was this long-awaited Messiah that the prophets of old had all talked about. Peter even said as much when Jesus asked that question, who do you say I am? He said, you are the Messiah. But they misunderstood what that meant exactly. You see, for them and the Jewish people, they believed in the long-promised Messiah who was going to come. But they thought the Messiah was going to be someone that was anointed by God to come and be a mighty military leader that would come and free them from the oppression of the government. In this case, it was the Roman government. And so when Jesus came along and said, I am he, I am the Messiah, they didn't believe him. Not completely because, well, he didn't really meet their expectations of what they thought the Messiah was supposed to be. Jesus was almost the polar opposite in that he taught that you should love your enemies. He didn't teach that you should go and kick their butts and overpower them and throw them out. He said you should love your enemies. They, like a lot of people today, they missed the mission of Jesus. And his mission was to bring freedom to all of humankind, not from oppression from a government, but to bring a different kind of freedom, a bigger freedom, freedom from the sin that chains and locks you and I up and separates us from a relationship with God. That's why Jesus came. And while he was here, he often talked about, how he would be misunderstood, that he would be betrayed, that he would ultimately be arrested, beaten, and then crucified on a Roman cross. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Peter's going to come up here and do communion. And that how he would, after he died, he would be buried, but then 3 days later, he would rise from the grave, alive. But people, especially those that were closest to him, they didn't understand what he was talking about. Not until much later when all those things started to happen. Jesus' followers, those that were closest to him, those that were hanging around, checking him out, they were so locked and loaded on their perspective of who Jesus was, they missed who he truly was, which was God in the flesh. But it's easy to sit there and say, well, how dumb can you be? But it's understandable, especially in that day and age. There were gods for everything. And every god had one thing. That was you worshiped that god and sacrificed yourself for that god. God didn't sacrifice himself for you, but that's what this God that the Jewish people were following was doing. He said, I have come and become one of you, one of my own creations. I mean, the idea was absurd. Unless, of course, God was the kind of God that was so desperately in love with his creation that he did it to show them what he was like. Who is Jesus? Who do you say he is? Maybe you're tuned in this morning and life feels unsure, it feels unsettled, even to a degree, maybe even hopeless. You just can't see an end to whatever it is you're going through. You got stuff going on in your life, and you're watching today because you're searching for answers, you're searching for hope, but you're just not sure if this is the place to find it. Your doubts about life and what's happening makes you wonder if God is in it at all, or how could he be in it? Or if there is a God and he existed, why is this happening? And you can fill in the blank for whatever that is for you, a financial crisis, a relationship crisis, a health crisis. You may hear people, church people like me say, God loves you and he cares for you. And he wants what's best for you. And there was a time that you used to believe that, but right now you're kind of, I'm not really sure. Again, if that describes where you're at when it comes to who Jesus is, you are in good company. After Jesus had been crucified on the cross and then 3 days later rose from the grave, he appeared to all of his disciples except one. Shortly after Jesus was buried, his closest followers were like, I guess he was just a man. And now this whole thing is over, and they were afraid for their lives. So they went to this room, and they kind of locked the doors and hid themselves in there. But Jesus appeared to them. And he said, I'm alive. You don't have to fear. But Thomas wasn't there, this one man named Thomas. And we read this, it says, Thomas was not with the others when Jesus came. And they told him, we have seen Jesus. But Thomas had the same reaction that a lot of us have. He replied, he says, I won't believe it until I see the nail wounds in his hands and put my fingers into them and place my hands into the wound in his side. Here's the thing, Thomas traveled and lived with Jesus day after day, month after month for years. And yet he still struggled to trust and believe that Jesus was who he said he was. And you know what? You know what's encouraging in that? Is it shows that Jesus gets that. He understands that. And he helped Thomas by giving Thomas and revealing himself to Thomas in a way that Thomas needed. And it was indeed by saying, Thomas, stick your fingers in my wounds. Author and pastor Max Lucado wrote a book called Experiencing the Heart of Jesus. And here's what he says. Listen to this. Jesus tends to his people individually. He personally sees to our needs. Jesus is a personal God that cares about you. He meets you right where you're at. Jesus doesn't expect us to take some huge mental or spiritual leap. The only thing he invites us to do is to take a step. Just a single step. Maybe that step is to check out to see if he's real, to see if his love for you is real. But to just take a step. There's an ancient Chinese proverb, and maybe you've heard it, and it goes like this. It says, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That's true, isn't it? The question becomes then, what is your next step? Maybe for you, your next step was tuning in this morning. Somebody invited you to, hey, you should check out our church. We're online right now. It's really easy to do. And you kind of, I'm not sure. But then you said, I'm going to take a chance. And that's your first step. Awesome. Come back next week. Maybe for you, you've been tuning in for a while. Or maybe even attended church when we were at the theater. You've heard a lot about God and Jesus and life and the church and how they all kind of intersect and mash together. But you still have questions. Those doubts kind of linger around. Well, maybe your next step is the Alpha course. It's a course that's been around for years, and countless people have gone through it and have had those big questions to life answered, those questions about faith and life and God and how they all intersect and work together. Maybe your next step, you've come to the place where you say, I've heard enough about Jesus. I want to follow him. I've made the decision to follow him, and now I want to let everybody know. I want to let everyone know that I'm on his team. And so for you, your next step is the step of baptism. And we witnessed 2 people take that step just a couple of weeks ago. And if you missed that message, I would encourage you to go back and watch it if you're not sure what baptism is all about. Or maybe for you, you're watching this morning, and your next step is to begin or to continue reading the Bible on a regular basis. To carve out a piece of time, mornings usually work for most people, but carving out some time to just slow down and be quiet and have kind of a one-on-one with God. And do that before your feet hit the floor and you're just flying out the door trying to meet the demands of your schedule and getting the kids here and getting off to get that and be here and be there and be everywhere. A great place to start is to go to the website ourdailybread.ca, and there you're going to find a simple, down-to-earth reading that is relatable and it's applicable. And it's going to take you about 5 minutes to read it. Just do that while you're having your morning coffee. It's a fantastic resource. And it can be the thing that's your next step, to actually log on and do that. Maybe your next step is to get plugged into a connection group. And who couldn't use a little more of that right now? Sure, they meet on Zoom, with stay-at-home orders we have. But I'll tell you, I've been on Zoom calls with people that I haven't seen in months, and I would rather have that than nothing. And so if that describes you, if you're yearning for that, if you want to get together with a group of people that are on the same journey as you, Just go to themeetingplace.org. In the top left-hand corner, you'll see a button that says Connection Groups. Click on there. It'll tell you everything you need to know, and we will get you plugged into one. The whole purpose of this series, Who, is to take a journey together, to go on an adventure, to get to know Jesus better than we currently do, whatever that looks like for us. And we do that by exploring his life. Because when you get to know Jesus and how much he loves you and what he is like, it is so much easier to begin to trust him and follow him as you make your way through this thing called life. You know, I've been a follower of Jesus most of my life, and I still feel like I know about that much about who he is and what he's like. And if I'm totally honest, my perspective of Jesus, who I think he is, has ebbs and flows, ups and downs, twists and turns. It's been far from consistent. I'll have days where I wake up and I go, man, is this really real? There's a really cool story in the Bible. Man, I can so relate to this story, and maybe you can too. This story is found in the second book of the New Testament. It's a letter that was written to some people, and the guy that wrote its name was Mark, and so they called the book Mark. Brilliant, right? And here's what Mark wrote about this story. Listen to this story. This is so cool. Let's just see if you can relate to this somehow. When they, and he's referring to Jesus and his disciples, arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and help him. Now, at first, you're thinking, well, those are awesome. Awesome, those people are doing that for him. But reading, different scholars say the reason they did that was not so the man could be healed and see, and it's like, hey, you know, Bob, you can see again. It was they wanted to see the Jesus show. They had heard how Jesus was going around healing people, and they said, I want to see it firsthand. Here's a blind guy. Let's see if Jesus can heal him. Jesus knew what they were thinking, and so here's what happens next. It says, Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. He wanted to have that one-on-one intimate contact, to get away from all the hubbub and the excitement of like, oh, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? He wanted to meet this man right one-on-one. And I love this. This doesn't show what Jesus is like. Listen to this. It says, then, spitting on the man's eyes, so Jesus spat. How cool is that? Hey, that rhymes. Anyway, he laid his hands on him and asked, can you see anything now? And the man looked around and he said, yeah, I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around. It's kind of like me when I take these off. I can see things, but not clearly, right? Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes once again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. What an awesome story. And I like to imagine that man left that time with Jesus singing that song the band sang. I can see clearly now. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's going to be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It is so encouraging that Jesus' interaction with this blind man seems to be revealing to us that seeing Jesus and our need for him takes time. It takes different amounts of time for each of us. Some faster than others. But this story also shows what Jesus is like. And that he's ever patient. That he's gentle. And he's compassionate. And he is tuned into exactly what you need to take your next step in your belief in him. So here's what I invite you to do after you log off today and get on with your day. Wonder. I invite you to wonder about this story and ask yourself how you see Jesus. and be willing to receive some increasing clarity of who Jesus might be that you haven't fully seen yet. Just wonder, who is Jesus? It is a question worth exploring because the answer could change everything. Really glad I get to be on this adventure with you. I invite you to pray with me. God, this whole you coming to earth to become one of us, to journey with us, was to reveal yourself to us in a way that was tangible and real and practical. And thankfully, those stories are recorded, and we have access to them today. So we can read about people's experiences and see our experiences in those stories. And we just thank you that in today's story, we just see that you are so patient, that you have a desire for all of us to come to a knowledge of you, to see you for who you are. But that's a different journey for each one of us. And you're just so open to just give us what we need in order to take those steps to move closer to you. So we just thank you for that. We thank you for loving us and that you put a plan in place for each one of us to come to get to know you. Thank you. And we pray this in your awesome name. Amen.